How do you sound smarter at work? Believe it or not, that question lands in my inbox more than almost any other, and it usually comes from people who are already good at their jobs but keep getting passed over for the recognition that comes with it. Here's why it actually matters. The employees who are perceived as smarter get remembered in calibration meetings, get pulled into the projects that matter, and get the raise conversations moving in their favor. So in this video, I'm giving you 4 insider moves to project intelligence at work without changing who you are. I'm Dre. I spent years sitting inside recruiting rooms and compensation planning meetings, watching how decisions about who gets noticed, who gets promoted, and who gets paid more actually get made behind closed doors. If that sounds useful to you, the subscribe button is right there, and I put one of these out every week. Before I get into the 4 hacks, one honest caveat. I'm sharing this because so many of the people I talk to are quietly excellent and almost invisible at work. They're not loud, they're not political, they just do great work and assume it'll speak for itself. It usually doesn't. On the flip side, I've also worked with people who try so hard to sound impressive that they come across as fake, and everyone around them can tell. So here's the rule for everything I'm about to share. If it feels unnatural to you, don't force it. These are levers, not a script, and the intention behind using them matters. You want to sound smarter so the value you're already creating actually gets seen, not because you're trying to inflate what you bring to the table. Keep that distinction in mind, and let's get into it. One more thing worth naming before we start. None of what I'm about to walk you through is about talent. In every promotion cycle and every compensation review I've been part of, the people who got tracked upward weren't always the strongest performers on paper. They were the ones whose contributions were legible, easy to summarize, and easy to repeat back in a room they weren't even in. That's the actual game being played here, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Hack number 1. Simplify your language. In every recruiting and comp conversation I've sat in, there's a pattern nobody talks about openly. People assume that stacking their sentences with dense corporate vocabulary makes them sound more capable. It's the opposite. Research on how we judge other people's intelligence consistently points to one thing. Clarity reads as competence, and complexity often reads as compensation for something. When you overload a message with jargon, what you're actually signaling is that you're either unsure of your own point or trying too hard to sound like you belong in the room. Here's what that looks like in practice. Picture an update that goes out like this. Per our cross-functional alignment session, we've identified several key blockers impacting our ability to operationalize the deliverable within the current sprint cadence. Nobody reading that email actually knows what's going on. Now compare that to this. We hit a few roadblocks this week, so the project is going to take a little longer than planned. That second version is the one that makes you sound like you're in control of the situation, not buried under it. This isn't about dumbing anything down, and it's not about sacrificing nuance either. It's about being precise enough that nobody has to work to understand you. In my experience, the people who can explain a complicated situation simply are almost always read as the smartest person in the room, not the ones burying their point under $10 words. One caveat here. This is not permission to strip out the actual substance of what you know. If you genuinely need a technical term because there's no simpler way to say it accurately, use it, and then translate it in the same breath for anyone who might not follow. That combination, precision plus translation, is what reads as expertise. Complexity for its own sake just reads as noise, and noise is forgettable. Hack number 2. Always land on one clear point. This is something that separated strong performers from forgettable ones over and over again in every one of those rooms I mentioned. Someone shares a genuinely good idea in a meeting, but they wander through 4 or 5 different threads to get there, and by the time they're done, Nobody remembers what they actually said. Now compare that to someone who wraps up with a single, direct line. Something like, "Here's the bottom line," or "the way I see it." That one sentence becomes the thing people walk away remembering, and it puts you back in control of the message instead of leaving your audience to piece it together themselves after the fact. If you take nothing else from this video, take this. Whatever you're presenting, whether it's in a meeting, a message to your manager, or a project update, close it out with one clean, quotable sentence. Not a paragraph, one sentence. It signals that you've already done the work of distilling the information down, which is exactly what people assume genuinely smart people do naturally, almost without effort. This one is especially useful in written communication because most people skim. If your email or your update doesn't have an obvious anchor line near the top or the bottom, the reader supplies their own summary, and it's rarely as generous as the one you would have given yourself. Now, those first two hacks are about what you say, but here's something most people get wrong, and it's actually the part that decides whether any of that lands the way you want it to. How you say it matters just as much, sometimes more, than what you're actually saying. I've sat in calibration conversations where a fairly average update delivered with total conviction got remembered, and a genuinely sharp insight delivered nervously got skipped over completely. That's not fair, and honestly, it's not how it should work, but it is how the room tends to work in practice, and it's exactly what hack number 3 is built around. Quick, honest disclaimer before I get into it. None of what follows is about manipulating anyone. It's about making sure your actual competence isn't getting lost in translation because of how it's delivered. Hack number 3. Project confidence on purpose. There's a well-documented link between how confident someone appears and how competent people assume they are, and it's been studied and revisited for decades now. It's an uncomfortable truth because it means the outspoken, moderately skilled person in the room often gets tracked for advancement faster than the quiet, highly skilled person who never raises their hand. If you're naturally more reserved, that's not a flaw you need to fix, but it does mean you need to be more intentional about how you show up in these moments. That starts with your voice. Are you projecting, or are you trailing off at the end of your sentences and letting your point fade out? It shows up in how you carry yourself. Shoulders back, real eye contact versus shrinking into the corner of the room. And it shows up in whether you're willing to say what you actually think clearly without 5 qualifiers stacked in front of it, just to soften the blow. None of this means being loud or aggressive, and it's definitely not about pretending to know things you don't, because that's the fastest way to lose credibility the moment someone asks a real follow-up question. It's about matching your outward presence to the level of competence you already have internally. The more you practice carrying yourself this way, the less it feels like a performance, and the more it becomes how people genuinely experience you, which directly changes how much weight your ideas carry once you're in the room. One place I'd tell you to practice this deliberately is the first 30 seconds of any meeting you're in, whether you're presenting or not. Say something early, even something small. People anchor their read of how sharp you are on the first impression you give them in that room. And staying silent for the first 20 minutes and then jumping in cold is a much harder way to land your point than easing into it early and building from there. Hack number 4, and this one is deceptively simple. Upgrade specific words in your everyday vocabulary. I picked this up early in my career from someone who trained executives on exactly this, and it stuck with me because small word choices carry a surprising amount of weight in how people read your competence. First, swap the word problem or issue for constraint. Nobody wants to hear there's a problem. It puts people on the defensive immediately. Constraint signals that you're already thinking about it as something to work around, not something that derailed you completely. Instead of saying, "We have a problem with the timeline," try, "We're working within a tighter constraint on the timeline than we expected." Second, swap the word change for recalibrate. People resist the word change instinctively. It feels disruptive and unplanned. Recalibrate signals a deliberate, considered adjustment instead of a reactive scramble. Instead of, "We need to change our approach," try, "We need to recalibrate our approach based on what we're seeing right now." Third, swap casual reactions like, "That's cool," or "Nice work," for something like, "That's sharp," or "That's strong thinking." It's a small shift, but it reads as more discerning and more senior than the casual version. And fourth, instead of asking someone to explain something, ask them to walk you through it. Explain can quietly signal that you're behind or confused. Walk me through positions you as someone gathering context deliberately, which is a very different signal to send, especially to someone more senior than you in the room. These are small changes individually, but they add up to a completely different impression over time. And people notice patterns in how you speak long before they can articulate why. One more swap worth adding to the list. Instead of saying, "I'm not sure," try, "Let me confirm and get back to you." Both sentences admit the same gap in knowledge, but only one of them signals that you own the follow-through. In every compensation conversation I've been part of, the people described as reliable were rarely the ones who knew everything. They were the ones who never left a gap open without a plan attached to it. So if you want the short version to actually put into practice this week, here it is. Before you send that next email, see if you can cut every sentence down by half. Before you leave your next meeting, force yourself to land on one clean sentence that sums up your actual point. Before you walk into your next conversation, check your posture and your voice, and give yourself permission to say what you actually think without 5 qualifiers stacked in front of it. And start paying attention to your own default vocabulary. Then start swapping in the sharper word, one conversation at a time, without overthinking it. None of these require a personality transplant. They're small, repeatable adjustments. And small, repeatable adjustments compound faster than almost anything else I've watched play out in real promotion decisions over the years. One quick, honest note. None of this is legal or HR advice, and how visible any of this makes you will depend a lot on your specific manager, your team, and your company culture. So use your own judgment on which of these actually fits your environment. If you only have the bandwidth to work on one of these this month, start with the vocabulary swaps. They're the lowest effort of the 4. You can start using them in your very next message, and they tend to build the confidence that makes the other 3 easier to practice on top of. I want to know which of these 4 hits closest to home for you. Drop a comment and tell me which one you're going to try first, or which one you're already doing without even realizing it. I read every single one of them. At the end of the day, sounding smarter at work was never really about sounding smart for its own sake. It's about making sure the value you're already creating doesn't stay invisible to the people who decide what happens to your career next. Clear language, one strong point, real confidence, and sharper word choices. That's what gets you remembered in the room when it actually counts. And being remembered is what eventually turns into the next opportunity. None of this replaces doing genuinely good work. It just makes sure the good work you're already doing doesn't get lost on its way to the people deciding your next raise, your next title, or your next role. If this was useful, hit subscribe It genuinely helps this channel keep going. And I've got a follow-up video coming on exactly what to say and what to leave unsaid the moment a negotiation goes quiet. That pause is doing more work than you think, and I'll break down exactly how to use it. I'm Dre, and I'll see you in the next one.